gentlemen, go ahead and get started. Welcome to everyone that's in the audience with us tonight, and welcome to all those that are watching us via live stream. This is our first meeting in October. We're going to begin with a moment of silence, and I'd like you to consider, especially, we had a 5th grader, unfortunately, lose his life from North Aiken Elementary this past weekend. So if you could pray for his family and his soul, I appreciate it. So just to have a moment of silence. Y'all want to join me for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first item is approval of the agenda. I don't hear any objections, we'll consider the agenda approved. All right, the next item is approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes, one from our regular meeting on September 22nd and a special call meeting on October 3rd. So I hear a motion for that.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded, we approve the minutes. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. All right, that's unanimous. None opposed? All right. Moving on to special orders of business, we have public participation. We have 3 folks signed up for public participation. If you can, when you come up, just make sure you're speaking in the microphone so the folks at home can hear you. And limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes or so. Once you get to 5 minutes, I'll cut you off. So, Ms. Stone, Amy Stone, and the topic is back to school.
I'm just going to read something that I prepared, and I thank you for this opportunity to share these concerns. I'm going to try to keep brief. I began drafting this response after reading the statement from Mr. Liner regarding the board's decision to return to 5-day instruction for middle and high school students. There were a few things in the statement that gave me pause, and after serious contemplation, I concluded that I must share my thoughts with the board for consideration. I take issue with the statement that says the board decisions are based on input from all, a word which is underlined for emphasis, stakeholders. I am a stakeholder, both as a parent and an educator. Based on repeated statements in multiple formats from both the board and the superintendent, middle and high school parents and employees were not expecting a decision regarding our schools during the October 6th meeting. It was repeatedly stressed that this meeting was to decide on a plan for special education in elementary schools. Had the board communicated even a possibility that this would be discussed, all stakeholders would have had at least an opportunity to provide input if they chose to do so. Instead, we feel blindsided at best and hoodwinked at worst. My other concern is the acknowledgement that this decision was made knowing that high school levels showed a slight increase after saying the board planned to return to a 5-day plan as long as the COVID data supported that decision. I would like to share some numbers with you, or data if you prefer. 20%. That is the percentage of my students who have been quarantined due to COVID between September 14th and October 13th. 43%. That is the percentage of that 20% who actually tested positive. Almost 10% of my students. These students are not a friend group or connected socially other than being classmates. I also had a student who acknowledged to me yesterday that she was sick last month after being exposed twice a day in close proximity to one of the students who tested positive. She did not want to go through the testing, and she continued to come to school. Middle and high school students cannot be compared to elementary in terms of opportunities for exposure. According to the CDC, COVID-19 incidence among adolescents aged 12 to 17 years was approximately twice that in children aged 5 to 11 years. There are certainly many factors that contribute to that, but we cannot minimize the fact that if we go back to 5-day instruction, we will not be following recommendations of the CDC, the World Health Organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Johns Hopkins, Yale Medical, and every other reputable source for help available. Social distance will be impossible in small classrooms with twice the number of students. What we will be risking in this experiment is student and employee health. Finally, I will say this. I'm not speaking from a place of fear of COVID, but from a place of reason. I contracted COVID after returning to work this school year. After staying at home all summer, having everything possible delivered, following every recommendation available, I still got sick. I was terrified before I contracted COVID because I have asthma and an autoimmune disorder and other things. My pulmonologist told me that it was very possible that I would not be able to survive COVID. Clearly, I did. Many people would take this as proof that COVID is not very serious, but that's not the case. What is the most dangerous about COVID isn't what we do know, but what we don't know. We don't know if having COVID provides immunity, but we do know you can get it again. We don't know how much permanent damage it causes, but we do know that it can attack every part of your body. We don't know who will get it, what symptoms, or how severe they will be, but we do know that it can be fatal. My students have asked me this week how we can keep them safe if we return to 5-day instruction. I ask you to consider what you would say to children who look to you for knowledge, guidance, and protection if that question were posed to you. What would you say if a student asked you, how can we socially distance from one another like we are supposed to if we don't have the room? My students know the risk, and they're trying to keep themselves safe. How do we tell them that it's more important to have them in school for 5 days? I understand the younger kids are stressed about the hybrid schedule. I also have students who are stressed about grades and the challenge of losing 3 days of direct instruction. This week, those same students are asking me about their lives. They are the most important stakeholders. And I ask you to please consider the ramifications of placing these students and educators in a position that flies in the face of every recommendation and every bit of data available. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Perrin Odom. Just make sure you speak into the mic, please.
Hi, I am a high school senior at Aiken High, and I came to speak about the issues that I personally see about. I'm a high school senior at Aiken High, and I came to speak about the issue about going back to school 5 days or 4 days a week. Personally, as a student, I feel that my health, the teachers' health, and the faculty of the school's health is at risk because we all know that COVID is not cured yet. With going back 4 days a week, we're doubling the class sizes. It's already hard for us 2 days a week to socially distance in the classrooms. So how will we be able to socially distance in the classrooms if the class size doubles? Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Kiera? Carol?
All right, I actually have a question. What other options do you have for the second graders to take the Iowa test next week if, according to the mask ordinance, people with behavioral issues and medical issues are not required to wear a mask, along with people with religious beliefs that prevent it?
Ms. McCurl, we don't typically answer questions in that, but I think if you leave your name, Mr. Lawrence will get back to you and be able to give you some kind of answer to that. And I have it here. If you can give Ms. Glover your contact information, we'll get an answer to you. Thank you. All right. Thank you all for your participation. The next item is Office of Board Chairman. I don't have anything under that tonight. All right, moving on to informational items. The following items are for information only and do not require board action. The first one is a COVID update. Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. We have kind of a mixed update. I just have a few things to share with you. The recent disease activity rating that we got on October 8th was high, but we do attribute some of that to the skewed Georgia numbers, and we'll see once we get past that spike that happened during that time, we'll see if that changes. No guarantee of that, but we are watching for that. Our school numbers, though, were actually lower. We had 2 employees and 7 students last week that tested positive. That was down from 9 employees and 8 students the previous week. And our quarantines are down from 233 the previous week to 159. Elementary schools, as you know, are in a modified traditional model with all face-to-face students in attendance Monday through Thursday. While it's certainly more difficult in some classrooms, teachers and administrators are adapting and making all possible adjustments that they can. I know that many of you have visited some of our schools at the end of last week and early this week as well. We expect plexiglass partitions to begin arriving early next week, and we'll start deploying those immediately. One thing about that, we know that we will not have enough for every classroom in that first shipment. Hopefully another shipment will be right behind it. And priority will be based on student density in classrooms. So we know that we do have many elementary classrooms that even though all of the students are back in school, they are able to maintain the 6 feet. So those are a little lower on the priority. But we also have a number of elementary classrooms that can't do it. So those are the highest priorities for delivery of the petitions. And those are the things that I wanted to share.
Questions for Mr. Lawrence? Go ahead, Dr. Bradley.
We have in our folder, we have in our folder a report called COVID Report, October 4th through 10th. And I think
Yes.
this is data that the public either doesn't see or chooses to overlook. Essentially what it indicates is that we have no category that reaches 1% of 1% infection rate. This is based on 22,601 students. We have less than 1% of those who've contacted COVID. We have 3,326 employees, and again, we have less than 1% who have contracted COVID. And it goes on and on and on. It breaks it down. I would personally like to see this data made available in a fairly easily accessible manner to the public. I mean, I hear all these numbers coming at me from emails from this one, that one, or the other. And I don't recognize some of the numbers I see, but again, for public consumption, I think it would be really good to put this on the website or do something so that anyone who wants to can see exactly how many students, how many teachers or staff, and so forth, particularly going forward, because this is the data that we need to compare with in the future, not all these numbers from DHEC and all that. They're important, but they do not reflect what's actually happening with school kids and the staff. That's what we need to look at. That's the people that we are charged with protecting and keeping safe and that sort of thing.
Yes, sir. This information goes into a press release, and it also is posted on our website. Now, we were finalizing this this evening. I saw a few edits before it actually goes out to the public, but it will be available.
That's good to hear. I haven't looked on the website, try to get it in paper, and I prefer paper to the website. Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. So the folks in the audience and at home, so you can go to the website and it's under
Back to
school safety. So if you want to look at the numbers for our district, back to school safety, you should be able to find them there. Any other questions for Mr. Lawrence? Go ahead.
Will it be in this format, or is it scattered out then into different words, different columns?
Well, so, some of the tables are in there, like the schools listed with their numbers are in table format. The general statement though is in paragraph form, but we can certainly adapt those things.
I personally would like to see these charts made available.
Okay.
All right, good suggestion, Dr. Bradley. Anyone else? All right, good. So, again, look for those on the website tomorrow sometime. All right, items 2 through 6 are construction status reports of our construction projects. Dr. Murphy.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. Mr. Lawrence, here's a brief overview of the progress that we've made on our current construction projects. The masonry walls continue, the masonry walls continue and joist installation will start soon at Belvedere. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing contractors continue the rough end. Testing and inspections continue daily for the wall rough end and the grout pours. As you can see here. This project is currently projected at $10.7 million and is on time and well within its budget. We continue on to Midland Valley. The athletic and dining addition is receiving revised paint and flooring selections. It is open and currently being used for student circulation from the drop-off loop. The dining area. The finished work continues in the front and the two-story classroom addition. Site work is wrapping up with the irrigation and landscape work. Both additions have received a verbal certificate of occupancy with conditions and are ready for punch list. This project is still ahead of schedule and barring any unforeseen conditions within its $18.2 million budget. Over at Millbrook, since the last update, the contractor has made steady progress, and in September, Area 1 and 2 were completed and received occupancy from OSF. This area includes the new media center, the new first grade classroom, guidance, and a few additional spaces. Furniture for these spaces has also been delivered and installed. This project is currently on its $9.6 million budget and is currently tracking about 2 weeks behind due to weather, but the project team is looking for opportunities to make that time up and to still meet its August 21st timeline. On to North Augusta, OSF final inspection has been completed. Final finishes are continuing. The parking lot area is complete and this project is currently on schedule. Look at the pattern wall. The entrance to the arena. The landscape contractor continues to work on the building exterior. Furniture and equipment delivery is scheduled for mid-October. The interior of the weight room. This is our chorus room. And the gymnasium. This project is on time and within its $16.3 million budget. On to Rich Spring Manila Elementary School. Construction of the new elementary school addition is continuing ahead of schedule and within budget. The structure of this addition is complete and most of the exterior veneer, including roofing, is approximately 90% complete. Interior finishes, including prime paint and ceiling grid, have started, while overhead and in-wall rough end of mechanical, plumbing, electrical, and fire alarm are continuing. two-story dining room area. And the media center. And again, this project is on time and well within its $20 million budget, pending your questions.
Questions for Dr. Murphy? Mr. Crane?
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. No questions. You answer my questions that I always ask about on time and budget, so things are looking good. I hate to hear about the little bit of delay at Millbrook, but that's okay. Everything looks good. Thank you.
Yeah, everything looks spectacular, Dr. Murphy. Thanks for following everything, so it's great. Any other questions? No? Good, all right, thank you. All right, moving on to consent items. The following items will be voted on as a group. Individual items may be discussed prior to a vote being taken. So we need a motion to hear the consent items.
Move here consent items.
Second motion.
So it's been moved and seconded that we hear the consent items. I'll go through them one at a time and stop me if you have any questions. The first one is a change order for flooring. It's a credit of about $20,000 from some work that we did at A.L. Corbett in Busby Elementary. So it's a credit of $20,000 for flooring. The next one is a Dollar General Literacy Foundation donation to Aiken High School, $2,000 to enhance the classroom libraries at Aiken High School. The next one is a Dollar General Literacy Foundation donation to Red Cliff Elementary School for $3,850. It's gonna be used for 22 Pioneer Valley Literacy Footprints Interactive Read Aloud kits for grades 5K through 3rd grade. So those sound like pretty interesting books there. The next one is a donation to North Aiken Elementary School for $1,000 from Frank and Dorothy Heckendorn. It's going to be used to purchase laptops for students. The next one is from Napleton Infinity of Augusta, a donation to Midland Valley High School for $5,000. It's going to be used for items provided for students who meet established criteria in academics, stuff like water bottles, backpacks, masks, day planners, earbuds, t-shirts. The teachers will be able to provide these incentives after each 9 weeks for perfect attendance. All right, the next two are from the South Carolina Arts Commission. One is for New Ellington Middle Steam Magnet for $7,500. And it's going to be used to purchase technology, include ThinkPads, laptops, and storage cart for visual and performing arts classes. And the next one is from Schofield Middle School. A nice round number here, $7,305. The monies will be used to purchase technology and art materials and supplies to include iPad, art supplies, and drawing racks. So those are both from the South Carolina Arts Commission. The next one is an amendment to the Head Start Early Head Start grant. Ms. Glover, you want to give us a little bit of, this is a little bit more involved than.
Sure. So when we originally wrote the grant, we had anticipated that we would have to buy 3 small buses to transport our Head Start children. And the prior grantee transferred the buses to us, so we have ample transportation to transport our kids back and forth. So that money, it was about $180,000, can be moved and used for other things. We are renovating or upgrading Gloverville at Luana Drive in Gloverville. And that facility is going to cost us a little more for the upgrades, for DSS licensure, for the fire alarm systems. We did not know when we put in money for fire systems that in K through 12, the requirements are a little different than just being in the business world. So it's those costs were a little more than we anticipated. So we're going to use that $180,000 to help us with the Gloverville Head Start facility, to pay for security alarms at those buildings, as well as those fire alarms we need for DSS licensure. And then we also were originally contracting with Barnwell County First Steps for administering Head Start and Early Head Start. Instead now, they're just administering the early Head Start portion for those students, and the Head Start portion is being administered by Aiken County Public School District employees that we've hired under the Head Start grant. So we just had to move those funds from contracted services to salaries and fringe under ACPSD. So those are our moves. Anytime under this particular grant that we need to move the slightest little thing, it has to come before this governing body. So you will probably see us asking for slight moves in money because we have to have your approval.
Good explanation, thank you. Any questions on that one?
And if I could, our Head Start director, Shady Hall, is in the audience, and she started in mid-July, I think. August 3rd, see, COVID happened. So I'm glad that she's on board and she's doing a great job.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Hall. All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we hear the consent items. Any more discussion on those 8 items? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? So that's unanimous. Kim? All right, moving on to individual items. We have a few of these, and each one of these are voted on individually. The first one is personnel appointments, and there was a list attached to our agenda. Do I hear a motion for that?
I move we approve the recommendation by administration.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded that we approve the recommendation from the administration. Any discussion on any of those? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? So that's 9. Kim, thank you. All right, the next one is out-of-district transfer requests, and these are transfers out of the district, and there was a list attached to our agenda. Do I hear a motion for that?
Move we approve the administration's recommendation.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded that we approve the administration's recommendation. Any questions on those transfer requests?
Those do have to pay tuition.
These are the ones out, Dr. Bradley, the next
Out,
one?
okay, it's the end.
Yes, and you, to answer your question, yes.
Next time, yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of that, the out-of-district transfer request, raise your hand. Any opposed? So that's unanimous, Kim. All right, so now these are the ones that come into our district, transferring in. Do I hear a motion for that?
So I'll move to do the same.
Second. So it's been moved and seconded that we approve the out-of-district transfer request, and there is fees that come into the district. Any other discussion on that? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. None opposed, so that's unanimous again. All right, the next one is suspension of policy IKAA for the 2020-21 school year. Ms. Glover, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Liner, members of the board, and Mr. Lawrence. So we are asking for consideration to be given to suspend this policy, which counts semester exams for high school credit courses, 20% of a semester average. Virtual SC, which is what we use for our virtual curriculum in the high school credit courses, for the majority of our high school credit courses, has waived exams for this year, and because those have to be proctored face-to-face, so Virtual SC's position is no midterm and semester exams. So we would like to have that same permission given to our face-to-face students, just for equity and fairness. So we're asking for that to be waived for this year.
Mr. Nessel and then Dr. Brady.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So how would, I understand the equity standpoint, couldn't you do the equity viewpoint the other way and create exams for our virtual students?
We could, so, and that would take a lot of work, and we're more than willing to do that should the board decide to go that route. Now, Virtual SC, remember, gives us our curriculum, so we would need to have our teachers get together to have a common exam across those courses. We don't have common exams, and because it's that set curriculum with Virtual SC, we would feel like, in talking with my team, that we would want to get teachers together to create that common assessment for a semester exam. Now, we don't do that now in the face-to-face model. We could certainly look at doing that. We do it with benchmarks, but we haven't done it for semester exams. So if that's the wish of this board, we certainly could do that, but this certainly would take some pressure off of our students and families and our teachers for the semester.
And those students would have to come in for
Yes,
virtual
sir.
exams.
Yes, they have to come in face-to-face for exams, according to virtual SC, if we were gonna give the exams. Now, they can give an assessment. We're asking that it not be weighted 20% of their grade for this term.
So clarify that again, are we eliminating semester exams, or are we eliminating how much it's weighted in the grade?
We're asking for the elimination, in this particular board agenda item, we're asking for the elimination of semester exams as well as the 20% requirement. Because we don't have semester exams that are gonna be given as part of virtual SC. And Mr. Postel's in the audience, our high school executive director, who's been helping lead this charge. If you have anything to add, Mr. Postel.
I think that's a good point that, sorry, microphone. That's really the sticking point for us, is on the 20%. In the face-to-face would get a 20% of the semester would count as the exam, but in the virtual, they don't get that. So that's what we're asking to adjust. Or that's why. Sorry, did that answer?
Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Why don't we give somebody else a turn and come back to me, okay?
Yeah, Dr. Bradley and then Mr. Silas and then Mr. Smith. And
Let
then
me make sure I understand what he just said before I ask my question. We're still gonna do 20% with the face-to-face kids.
No, sir. We're asking for that to be waived for both face-to-face and virtual,
What's the rationale for not doing it with face-to-face?
because we wouldn't be doing it for virtual.
The policy that we have to deal with does not require face-to-face for an examination.
No, sir. The policy just,
So we don't have to use their exam even, do we? According to our policy. They waived theirs.
right, they've waived exam requirements for virtual
So we
SC.
can let teachers make their own exam.
They could.
When I was in school, we didn't have standardized semester exams for classes. We had those for other things.
Right.
I assume that that's what happens now. In
It
most
doesn't.
cases, is it not the teacher makes up the exam?
Yes, sir.
And I guess I'm asking, why do we need to monkey with that?
In virtual SC, the exams
I
that,
know, but we eliminated virtual SC because they waived their requirement.
right,
And that doesn't mean that we can't have our own requirement, do we?
we can.
I mean, we could require that the teacher just giving kids a test. Are they giving tests to the kids in virtual?
Yes, sir, they are. They're part of the curriculum that's given to us by virtual SC. So there are standard assessments that they give.
I'm just thinking that we have to have some kind of measurement of student learning in order to give them a grade. And I don't care whether it's 20% or not, personally, I just would like to have, I just sort of like to leave it to the teacher to come up with an assessment approach that they feel like has adequately assessed the learning that's occurred. I think if we just dismiss testing, that sends a pretty poor message. You know, it's like we're doing all this stuff to avoid COVID, but we're not holding kids accountable for their learning. And that's the only objection I've got, is that I really think that we ought.
So they're still assessing, it's the 20% of their grade. We've heard from teachers about right now they're in the 2 days per week, and then we're going back in November, and that heavy weighting on one exam, they're giving tests, they're giving assessments all throughout to monitor progress. But because this is such a unique year, there's been concern about 20% on one assessment.
Mr. Collins, they're gonna counter that. I had courses, the whole grade was what you did on one exam. And we have to prepare kids for the assessment that measures what our students are learning, and that their grades need to be based on that. Hopefully, the assessment is a good one, fair one. But I know that when you teach kids 2 days a week and give them work to do on the other 3, they're probably not gonna be able to do as well as if they were in class 5 days. And if the semester tests that are usually used are based on 5 days of in-class instruction, that's probably not fair to the kid.
We also have, you know, with any virtual, sometimes we can't help it if a parent helps them. And so, you know, those kinds of things come into play too. And that's why virtual SC's position has always been for them to come in and be proctored for that final, that semester exam.
But they're gonna be competing in college with kids who had to take the test under the usual conditions and earn a grade. These kids are gonna get some dispensation because of the format, and the grades may not be comparable, but when you apply for college admission, that transcript is gonna be one of the major things that gets looked at, so, I mean, it gets a little complicated in my mind.
Before we get to Mr. Gonzalez, good, Mr. Lawrence.
Yeah, I just want to clarify the position just a little bit. As Ms. Glover said, there are assessments, there are tests given every day in our classes, and there's nothing that precludes a teacher from doing a cumulative test either. The point is that SC Virtual, which we're talking about our students in SC Virtual. So there's a segment of our students, basically a third of our students, who won't be required to take that final exam. So 1/3 of our students will not have a highly consequential one-sitting test that counts 20% of their grade, while the other 2/3 of our population will have a test that counts 20% of their grade. To Mr. Nessel's question about could we do it the other way, and Jeannie said, yes, it does complicate things beyond the issue of creating something from scratch. Our teachers would do. Our teachers who did not create that curriculum would be creating a test to match that curriculum. But also the grading of our SC virtual courses or virtual SC courses is kind of a progression. So it builds throughout the year until, which is why they're gonna kind of get a pass-fail grade for the first 9 weeks. And then at the end of the semester, we transpose that virtual SC score into our semester grades. If we took that semester grade and then gave an exam and recalculated that grade, I just don't see where that would be equitable for either of the students, whether it was the SC virtual students or our face-to-face students.
I guess I don't really, so.
Go ahead, Dr. Bradley.
I said, I just don't see, we let virtual SC drive the decision making. And all I'm saying is the teacher knows what she's taught, or he's taught. They sit down and they make up a list of questions ordinarily on what they teach. It doesn't have to be a monumental task. I mean, they sit down, they know what they're taught. We don't have standardized testing for grades in our school system. We do have standardized testing, not for grades. There's some dispute about how much we have to rely on some of these things for grades and all, which I think we can get away from. But, all I'm saying is, why don't we just leave it to the teacher to make a test? And we can waive the 20% if you want to, or this sends a bad message. I mean, I don't know how many people have asked me today, what are you gonna do? You're not gonna give these kids exams? How do you know what they learn? I think that there needs to be assessment that is as near to what we typically do as possible. Again, not following requirements from this SC virtual program or whatever, but just our policies, what I'm dealing with, not theirs. waive theirs. And we can certainly vote to waive theirs as far as our kids are concerned. But at the same time, I'd like to think that our kids are getting some kind of reasonable evaluation. If we're gonna be giving them a grade that is translated into a high school unit credit, which is going on a transcript, which will be used for various purposes. Maybe I'm just making a false distinction here. I don't know if I'm making myself clear or not, or if I'm understanding it clearly.
Well, let's get through the rest of the discussion and see if that helps out a little bit. Mr. Silas, and then Mr. Smith, and then Mr. Nessel.
So I like the idea of equality, across both platforms. I think that makes some sense. Which way it goes, I guess, is up for discussion, but, and the district's asking to waive this policy for the entire school year.
For the school year.
Could you explain the thought process for why the entire school year?
Virtual SCs is for the school year. I mean, that was really where we started, with virtual SC waiving exams, and that those students would not be coming in to take those semester exams, and the heavy weight that's placed on those exams when the virtual SC kids wouldn't be taking what is normal for virtual SC. So as Mr. Lawrence mentioned, the highly consequential exam that those kids would not get versus the kids face-to-face. And we can administer, the teachers can create an exam. But
So I like the equality, as I said. I'm not too keen on loosening a requirement for a student to be tested on their retention of a semester's worth of material, but.
And I don't want to give the impression that our teachers are not getting that information, because we are assessing students to make sure they're progressing towards meeting grade level expectations. And one of the things that we have done in the past that we suspended for first quarter was benchmarks, because seeing how students are progressing towards grade level expectations, because that formative data is critical to help drive instruction. So it was really more about the weighting of something in a virtual, or not occurring in a virtual environment, because it had been waived versus the face-to-face. But we certainly, if it's the will of this board, could go to our teachers and ask them to create something, since virtual SC doesn't have it.
I could consider a change in the weight, but thank you, Ms. Lover.
Go to Mr. Nessel.
I'm curious, is virtual SC on a block schedule, or are they scheduled like us?
So typically, it is a semester course. We have stretched them all to a year. And Mickey, that's correct, right? There may be a couple of courses that are unique, but the majority of those, if you wouldn't mind standing up.
We've taken their semester courses and we've stretched them to align with our year-long calendar. And our teachers have also been working collaboratively to supplement their virtual SC curriculum with some of our materials as well.
Because virtual SC, they normally get no live sessions. It's strictly reading the content. Because typically we've had students take virtual SC courses, typically around 300 to 500 students each year. It's because they want to earn a credit that they didn't have or get ahead. We're using it for a totally different purpose this year. And so we knew we were going to, at the mid-year point, give parents an opportunity to go back to face-to-face if they so chose. So to better align with our curriculum, stretched it out over the course of the year and got permission from virtual SC to do that.
So, and I just want to, with regard to, we do have the ability to. Thank you.
So we do have the ability to create internal exams and administer those to the BSC, but with our franchise, because they would have to be proctored, so the AI students would have to come in, we'd have to schedule them to come into the building to make sure that they were administered under a proctored situation.
Go ahead, Mr. Nessel.
Yeah, so I was curious, what else is virtual SC not doing that we're doing for our in-person students? Like in the realm of assessments or anything else?
Not sure what you're asking.
So you bring this issue to us that basically we want to eliminate semester exams because virtual SC does. I'm just wondering what else is there? Is there, what's the delta?
So, so virtual SC, really the only thing that they've eliminated from their courses that is atypical is the proctored exams. They did that in the spring, and then they made the decision early in September that they were gonna go ahead and waive those exams for this school year. So that's really the only thing. Now, in a traditional, typical setting for virtual SC courses, we are offering the live sessions here in the district, but they have maybe one live session per semester, and it's really just kind of a pulse check, introducing yourself, letting you know what the expectations of the course are.
Yeah. And just last question, I want to make sure I understand it. So are we saying you cannot do semester exams, or that you don't have to do semester exams?
If we were gonna, so.
I'm gonna say,
with
I'm not.
virtual SC, if we were doing an exam, we would have to have it proctored.
Yeah.
We're just doing assessments.
No, yeah, I'll rephrase. I'm not against leaving it up to the teachers. I think that actually might be a fantastic idea. That's why I'm trying to understand, are we saying you cannot do an end of semester exam, doing a cumulative knowledge, or that you don't, it's not required in the policy, but teachers still have that flexibility? Which one?
Yes, a teacher can administer a cumulative exam,
Okay.
right? If they, now in virtual SC, now I'm talking about face-to-face. I'm gonna leave it to.
That's what I'm
Mickey
asking
to
about.
answer
Yeah,
about.
that's what I'm asking about.
In face-to-face, a teacher can create a cumulative exam, but, we were asking that, I mean, the idea of the word exam. So when I say that, I'm saying that it would be a cumulative test. Because the word exam suggests that it's a 20% of the semester grade.
Yeah, just the one thing I keep thinking about, and I'm not saying this influences my decision greatly, is, I've got two kids that are freshmen in high school, so that's a transition, I understand it, and they've been going to school 2 days a week. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to leave the teacher in the decision-making process of what they're gonna do for that particular class. Just because I've seen what the struggle has been for them. But.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Vanessa. Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
2 questions, please. I thought I read in the paper a few weeks back that the state superintendent of schools said that we would be assessing students at the end of the year. What am I confusing here? Is that end of course?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So end of course exams for those gateway courses, Biology 1, English 2, US History, and then our state summative assessments like SC Ready, SC Pass.
Going back to the original discussion, as a old teacher, coach, administrator, I cut my teeth on exposure, repetition, and assessment. Those went hand in hand to me throughout my career. I'm sitting here, and it may have been explained, but obviously I may not have picked it up. What are we going to use to assess our children? And because without that, we're not helping them to realize where they are, may be missing. And that's what I'm worried with, all we've had to miss. So, any plans in any of this?
So we do have, there are formative assessments built within the virtual SC courses. There are assessments that our teachers give. We have them built in our curriculum. Common formative assessments that we give that are aligned to our standards, aligned to the pacing in the curriculum. So those things are there, and our teachers are doing, those pulse checks on students.
Okay. I want to take it a little step further.
Yes, sir.
Those things that are there, will they be able to give a student a view of what they may be, where they may be lacking? Is there enough information to do that with them so they can give this to the student, so they can know? I may be taking it a little further, but it is something that I'm sure I'm gonna be asked.
Right, so, I mean, again, our teachers giving those assessments are monitoring progress all the time and letting families know where their students are. And we have parent-teacher conference coming up very soon, November the 1st, 2nd, Monday, whatever that Monday, the 2nd. But yes, all of those assessments give, quality information on how students are performing against our grade level expectations.
And if we decide not to test as a whole, teachers will be doing some assessment material to show the kids their strengths and their weaknesses, not just saying you got an A or a B or something to that effect.
So we have great teachers, and I'm under, I would say that yes,
Good.
that they do that. We don't see all of those exams here, principals, our assessments here. We know the ones that are in our curriculum that teachers use and what data those provide. But teachers do make their own tests, and are all of them of excellent quality? I don't see them all. Principals monitor that, so I can't say with 100% certainty, but I feel confident about our teachers that they do that.
Mr. Green and then Mr. Moulton.
So I like the idea of giving the teachers the ability, if they so choose, let's say hypothetically, the board says yes to this, and the teacher decides, well, I'm gonna choose to give a test that's worth 20%. So speak to that scenario.
So we're asking for a waiver from that. So if you have one class that's given 20% and another school teacher teaching the same thing not doing that, that to me would create issues. Now we do have categories, 60% classwork, homework, 40% of those tests and quizzes, stuff in teachers' grade books. So we have that, but when we count one exam or one test, 20%, that's our struggle right now.
Right.
If a teacher wanted to give a cumulative test, like Mr. Lawrence said, and count it in that larger category of grades, that would be what we'd advocate for at this time. But as I said,
And if the board approves this suspension of the policy for this year, and a teacher did that, they'd actually be violating policy. So we would count on principals to monitor that.
Well, I appreciate that. So essentially, I'm in favor of giving some control of this to the teacher at the end of the day. And I've talked about, we're asking for grace on a lot of things, and I think this is an extension of some grace in a rough year. So I'm all for it. From that standpoint, I share some of the concerns about assessments as well, but ask a student how many tests they take. I know that's been done on an ongoing basis, so I think I'm in favor of the spirit of it.
Mr. Moulton, Ms. Jackson, and then Mr. Justin.
Thank you, Ms. Glover. My question would be, when is this proctored exam through SC Virtual normally administered?
so at the end of the course, which is typically December, or if we're doing, typically December. And we're stretching it out so that they would actually have to do the December and the end of year.
Okay, I too think that the teachers can make some pretty good decisions. I certainly support that. The only thing, after all the discussion I'm hearing, the only thing that I think might be nice, since we have a little bit of time to work with here, would be to ask of the district to look at, of the staff, to look at how can we regulate, how can we make sure that the teachers are doing something similar for each of their classes and grades. Because if we don't have a standard assessment, I'd like to make sure that, what they're doing is somewhat similar. I trust them 100%, I think they're the experts, but I just don't want one teacher doing something that's 10% when another one's doing something that's 1%. I just think we ought to look at that. Just curious as what you think about that.
Well, I agree. Standardization helps, when you have things systemic, which we've been trying to do for years. It ensures that a student at one school is being treated the same way as a student in another school. So, you know, we talked about haves and have-nots, that goes with grading as well. So, you know, that's definitely, we could look, with something we could look at. It does take time if we're gonna look at creating, so we have some educators in the room who have served on our curriculum planning teams, and those things they take time to build a good assessment, especially if you're considering it being 20% of a student's grade.
Just one follow-up. I agree. I mean, I'm probably in support of this already. I just wanted to, I don't want to put any additional burden. We've got enough going on with COVID and dealing with that. I don't want more burden on teachers. And in fact, this would reduce the burden, but I also hear the discussion. I have value for making sure our students, you know, we understand whether they're hitting the mark or missing the mark, and more importantly, they understand. So that's all. I mean, I'm just trying to hit a happy medium in there if we can, without creating a lot of work on someone.
Ms. Jackson, Mr. Nesselman, and Dr. Bradley.
Okay, I'm probably gonna take this totally off, so bear with me. How many AI students do we currently have? 1,900. Okay.
Oh, in
so-
high school, about 1,900.
Okay, so am I?
But we have I'm sorry, we have middle school students who are in high school courses as well.
Okay, so am I to understand that in the AI, with the 1,900 students that we have, they will be required to come in to take a proctored test, 1,900 students now, I want to say that again, that the parents chose to keep them at home for social distancing reasons. I hope that came out right. I was ready to,
And that's also for each course.
Okay.
So
then-
1,900 times the number of
Okay.
courses they take.
So if we do not waive this, then we as a board, as a district,
No.
will be required to accommodate those 1,900 students in a social distancing measure,
No.
in order for them to take their test,
I don't think so, no.
that proctored test.
I think we're talking about waiving the policy for the in-person students.
What?
We're talking about waiving the policy for both. So
Okay.
if we're going to have to administer an exam that's 20%, we're gonna have to bring those kids in to give them a highly consequential exam. We'd have to create an exam because SC Virtual has waived the exam. So we're gonna have to have an exam that,
So, therefore, we go back to a complicated situation of having to have a safe and sanitized space for students who specifically chose AI, or parents who specifically chose AI for their kids to stay home out of this, but we're gonna bring them back into it. Am I clear? I just wanna make sure that that's part of what we're discussing.
that was one of the things we were asking to be, one of the reasons we were going for a waiver of
Okay,
this.
thank you for that clarification.
Go ahead, Mr. Nesselman, and then Dr. Bradley, and then Ms. Shealy.
Yeah, so lots of times when we create a policy, we have 2 readings before we enact it. But we can suspend one just with 1 meeting. And I've heard enough discussion that what's the harm in waiting to the next meeting?
We can do whatever the will of the board is.
No, come on, no, that's not the answer I'm looking for. I'm just saying, like, what's your lead time on a decision on something like that?
Well, we need to let teachers know and parents know if we're gonna do, an exam where we have to proctor students. And if we're gonna create them, we definitely
Yeah.
need
Okay.
teachers to be a part of that.
Okay.
Dr. Bradley, and then Ms. Shealy.
My head's going around about this. This SC Innovate, whatever, they've already given up. Now, what does that do to us? Are we required to give it up also, or can we do our own thing, or?
We could give an exam.
I know, but I mean, what are the requirements for us to be in favor with this group? Do we have to? I mean, King said we can't even use the word exam, which is sort of.
So,
I just said I wouldn't use the word exam, because it implies that.
But, you know, I just don't see how what they do relates to us if we want to do something different. I mean, it seems to me that once they say we're not gonna do this, we're not gonna require this, that releases us to do whatever we want to do, okay? Now, one, I don't want to bring virtual students into a fiscal plan to take an exam. One, if we suspend this policy, it leaves us with nothing in its place. It's up to you guys, the board is out of it, which I don't think we can do. We can tell you we don't want the kids to come in. I don't want a group of teachers to have to come together and make some kind of standardized examination that we're gonna give to everybody. For 1 year, I'm willing to trust teachers to make an exam. It might not be fair. Some teachers' exams are gonna be harder than other teachers. I've been to school, I know that happens. But for 1 year, rather than just to say we're not gonna do, I don't know what we're gonna do if we don't do this, because y'all haven't told us that. I think I'm just falling all over myself and repeating myself, which I do sometimes. I'm not the most articulate person on the board, which I've proved in the last week or two. But as far as this is concerned, I do think that we should put something in its place. And I don't want to challenge them. I don't even want to do what they were requiring us to do in the first place. I don't care whether the exam, I think it ought to be a summative exam, because that's what they need to get used to, because that's what they're going to get in higher ed. But let's let the teachers make up their own test and figure out how to assess what they've taught and see what the students do with it. That's my proposal. I'm even willing to make a motion, but I don't think we're ready for that.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Ms. Shealy, and then,
I was gonna just echo what they've said. You know, I would like to see us have some type of way to kind of see where the students are at. And I think that it is a great idea for us to do our own thing and let the teachers decide, you know, but I am concerned. If we do that, then there's still no way we can monitor the progress of the virtual students, right? Is there any way, and maybe I'm trying to simplify this, but is there any way that we can work in concert with SC Virtual to see if they would give some type of exam, not counting 20%, so it would be kind of something to give us a benchmark to look at?
So when the conversation kind of started with Virtual SC waiving their exams, in curriculum design, our curriculum as well as Virtual SC is done in a backwards by design process. So we start with standards, we create an assessment based on those standards. What do the students have to learn and be able to do at the end? We're gonna create a test that will show us that they are able to do those things. And then the curriculum, the instructional pieces, all of those pieces are put together to align to that assessment. So we kind of work backwards. Well, when Virtual SC contacted us and said, we're waiving our exams, so they had an exam that was built based on the curriculum and standards that they created. They waived that exam, and our first question to them was, can we still use your exam? So Virtual SC's response to that was that we weren't able to use that. They didn't want to violate the confidentiality of that assessment by allowing it to be given under a non-proctored situation. So they wouldn't allow us to use the assessment that the exam that they have created for their curriculum. So that was when we started having the conversation of, these kids over here don't have an exam that will count 20%, and these over here are scheduled, and we're gonna give them an exam that will count. So that was kind of how we started the whole conversation. And then worried about the equity of that, some of the students having a 20% one assessment. Both the face-to-face teachers as well as the Virtual SC and our Schoology AI courses, they all have assessments built in them. Our face-to-face teachers are using the common formative assessments that we created and curriculum teams that are directly aligned to our curriculum and state standards. So they're still using measures to progress monitor students to determine, are they mastering the standards that they need to master? Do they have the skills they need? And where are their weaknesses? I think the biggest concern was, we're still gonna progress monitor, we're still gonna make sure we're giving assessments. We just didn't wanna have one pocket of kids who had a one-time sitting assessment that counted 20% of their semester grade, and then another pocket of students who weren't engaging in that.
I just want to clarify, well, not even clarify, but just expand on that. I want to be sure that there's no misunderstanding in the public or anywhere else that we're not giving tests. We're giving tests every day. In fact, I get calls at least weekly from parents telling me that their kids are taking too many tests.
Yeah,
So
sometimes
tests-
5 on one day.
So
Yeah.
tests are happening. There's no question that we're assessing our students. Formative assessment, summative assessment, those things are going on, grades are going in the grade book. This is just a single test that we're asking, one test. The test at the end of the course that counts 20% of the grade. That is truly the only thing that we are asking the board to waive. One test.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jack.
Two questions. How long or when did, South Carolina Virtual inform us that they were waiving this test?
Probably the beginning of September.
Okay. It is, the middle of October. I just wanna know why we weren't informed of that then, so that we could be thinking about this. My second question is, depending on the outcome of this vote, if the vote goes to, the children have to take some sort of assessment, and those AI students are required to come in, because you all will require them to come in and take a test, because that's the, okay.
It's 20% of their grade.
Okay, and the AI students are required to come in, maybe it's not so much a question, but just a thought, how are we gonna accommodate those students?
Well, it would be a scheduling situation. We would bring them in to, kind of like when they come in to take, SAT or an ACT, we would have a testing room that we would bring them in for.
Okay, but aren't we as a board going against something that we set in motion when we allowed them to become AI students?
Now, we did say, Mr. Lawrence, when students enrolled in AI, there are some instances that the State Department of Ed has said they have to come in face-to-face. End of course is one of those in spring, unless, unless something happens and those tests go away, which we're hearing they are
I
not.
just wanna make that clear.
Yes.
Seriously,
So,
to the
a
AI
lady-
parents,
so
so
the
that we
parent-
won't start getting the calls
Yes,
of,
ma'am.
oh, I chose this, and now you're going against that.
Right.
So let's make that clear, that they knew when they signed up for AI, that there was a possibility that their children would have to come in and possibly, at some point, face-to-face for this exam or assessment. So I just want that out there.
And to address your first question about the timing of that, we apologize.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot going on, and it just wasn't something that,
It was timing of it even registering with us and being able to focus
Right.
on, this is it. Then communication with them on what our options were for the virtual setting. It was just timing.
Let's go, Mr. Smith. And then I'm gonna kind of summarize a few things and then maybe we can go ahead.
I had a question, but mine was, or do we still bring kids into course?
yes, sir.
And it was clear, and the other part of it was gonna be the homeschoolers, do they still come in too?
So those who are approved, we just had that conversation today. So those who are approved under our board, yes, they are assessed here on site, or not here, but at school, their home school. What would be their home school?
Mr. Nestle, you got something? Or-
Yeah, I got a motion. I mean, I'm just thinking about, I'm not trying to get sarcastic or anything, that last week, we gave elementary schools 3 days to prepare for all kids coming back. End of semester exams are 3 months away. And I know some people may find this silly, it's still not clear in my head. And I'd like to think about it. So my motion is to table this to the next scheduled meeting.
I'll second that. So it's been moved and seconded that we table this item to the next meeting. Any more discussion on that? All right, so all those in favor of tabling it to the next meeting, raise your hand. All right, so that's 9, none opposed. All right, so I think you got plenty of information from the discussion, so maybe we can have a different recommendation or a more enhanced. I think one of the keys is what Dr. Bradley said too, is have something in place to fill this void if we suspend it. So that might be key. All right, so we tabled that to the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Nessel, for that motion. All right. The next one is a request for funding of the COVID-related PPE items. Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Traxler.
I'm going to ask Mr. Traxler to share some information on that.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members, Mr. Lawrence. We have a request for some additional funding that we're bringing forward tonight. In particular, the focus is on desk partitions, and I think that's really what the need is. We currently have 8,000 that we've requested from the state. Of course, that covers about half of our face-to-face students. So our hope is that we'll be able to have the state pay for some additional partitions, but if not, we'd like for the funds to be approved so we could get moving on that. There is some lead time on these, so the sooner the better on those items. This request here, if approved, and if there's a need for the district to pay for it, it would be from aid to districts funds. It's not general fund, but it is EIA funds. Those are funds that don't have the typical strings attached to them. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Smith and Dr. Bradley.
Trey, if it comes out of those funds, what will not be gotten that was planned for those funds?
Really, those weren't earmarked for anything specific at this time. Those typically are funds that are available to us during the year if something comes up that's unexpected. Or those are always funds that could carry over to the next year that may be used to help us balance the budget or could be used for some other item.
Go ahead, Dr. Bradley.
I just wanted to know what these things look like. You know, I've been asked that question and, you know, I'm not sure I know what they look like. I imagine a little three-sided cubicle or something that sits on top of the desk.
Yeah, so the typical one for a student desk, it's three-sided. It has to go a foot above the student's head while sitting and a foot beyond the table. So it really is a U-shaped tier partition. Now for another option for a table that has multiple students, it would be something that, you know, it's like a crosshatch that divides the table into 4 sections.
Good, Dr. Bradley. Go ahead, Mr. Ness.
And this is a short kind of redirect. So any of the ones that we would purchase on our own, like DHAC put out a memo October 5th on what the requirements were. They would meet the DHAC requirements in that memo?
Yes.
Okay. And you answered my second question, but I want to hear it again. We're addressing this, like, small group tables? Like,
Yeah.
the three-sided ones seem like they fit like a desk like when I was in school, but a lot of younger kids go to class and, you know, like on small tables, like 4 to a table. And are we addressing that as well?
Yes, sir, we're looking at sourcing for those as well.
Okay.
And we also are looking at what our Career and Technology Center can do. We would have to source the materials that they might be able to do, in particular those ones that really end up being 2 large pieces of plexiglass with notches cut in them so that they can sit there. So anything that we can do in-house, we're going to do in-house if we can source those materials.
Mr. Crane, go ahead.
Mr. Traxler, can you refresh my memory on the total amount of those funds? I know what we're asking for here.
It's $250,000 right now. We've seen some of those, just looking at pricing that have ranged from 25 up to 60 or 65, different configurations. Mr. Lawrence mentioned and Mr. Nessel asked, we would want to ensure that they meet those dimensions recommended by DHEC. We're also looking at timeliness. We aren't looking to break the budget, of course, if we do have to purchase these out of district funds, but we do want these to get here as soon as possible too.
So with this request, that will leave us with roughly how much in that bucket in case we have future needs this year?
You caught me off guard.
Sorry.
I mean,
Didn't mean to do that.
it will not wipe those funds out. There's several hundred thousand in it, and typically we carry over a balance because that does provide an additional option in the event of state budget cuts, in the event that we have to utilize those funds to balance the budget.
And that
or cover
answers
some of
really
that.
what I was trying to get at. So that's,
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Ms. Jack.
I have two questions. Why the ask in the information for the disposable gowns and the thermometers, especially thermometers when temperature checks are not required?
It's, just info. That top part is just, a recap of the items that we have purchased this year as we prep for the year. And thermometers were one of the items that we purchased in addition to gloves, in addition to masks. And then, we've also received a lot of shipments from the state as well. Just kind of as a side note, we're working on a survey now from the state where they've offered to reimburse us for certain items that are on hand. We have to provide an abundance of documentation where things were received, invoices, what the costs are, but we're submitting that this week. We're hoping for the items that we have on hand that we purchased since July 1, that we'll get some reimbursement for that.
Okay, well, since you said this was already previously there, I guess my question now is, what exactly is the ask?
We're asking for approval for $250,000 if needed, that will be utilized for petitions.
So it's strictly position?
I think we're covered on all of our other needs.
Just a point of clarification, so the ones that, for the individual desks, they would go to the floor then, or would they sit on the desk?
The ones that the state approved and the state is sourcing, they go on the desk and extend beyond the desk.
Okay, I understand that. I'm just gonna make an editorial statement here. I think these are good. I think anything we can provide to add an extra layer of defense is certainly necessary for our students and our staff. But, if you do some reading about the plexiglass, they're not the end all to beat all, I'll say. So I'm just gonna put a plug in for everyone being their brother's keeper, right? So, if you're sick, don't come to school, wear your face mask, wash your hands, use your hand sanitizer, try to avoid touching your nose and mouth and things like that. So those are really the main things that are gonna keep everyone safe. So that's just a public service announcement there. Any other discussion on this item? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, so that passes. Kim? All right, moving on to, thank you, Mr. Traxler, Mr. Lawrence. Moving on to individual board members. We have two items. Mr. Nessel, go ahead.
Sure, and just looking for a little bit before I start, can this just be a discussion, or do I need to put this in a motion?
Either way, if you wanted to have a discussion first and then put it in a motion, that's fine, or.
So this started out with some correspondence from a constituent, but then later on, DHEC actually updated their guidance, and we can go find it on the DHEC website. It came out last week where they strengthened some of their guidance, but talking about people without symptoms of COVID-19 who are frequently in the community, and the one line I'll read from their guidance is that you know, they recommend testing folks at least once a month if you're frequently out in the community, and so forth and so on. And then the CDC doesn't recommend that we do testing in schools, but if you dig deeper in their guidance, the CDC does talk about in areas with moderate to substantial community transmission, that you should consider doing testing of people that don't have symptoms, especially if things like where continuity of operations is a priority, like with critical infrastructure workers, which I believe our teachers have been designated. And I think I've seen several news reports that DHEC has been saying that not enough people are getting tested. Okay, and then I'm getting to the end here. Then if you look at their DHEC website, as far as the free testing they offer, what's available in the next 2 weeks, well, there's one location in Aiken County, and you can go Wednesday, Thursday of this week, or next Monday from 9 a.m. to 1, where folks are working, right? So one of the things, if we just one of the things I think would be useful is, given what the guidance is that if we could somehow partner with DHEC or a different agency or a group to provide folks with the opportunity to get voluntary testing, because I don't think I want to go over the line to say that folks have to do it, just so that there's a better understanding of asymptomatic people in our schools. And that's what I wanted to discuss with the board. And we'd be asking the district to try to work with somebody on that.
So we have started looking at some of that after getting your request, looked at some options, and we've talked with Rural Health Services, and they have some possible suggestions. We don't know what the cost of that would be yet. It wouldn't likely be a free service for us. It would be something that there would be a cost for. But they did have a thought of possibly having a couple of their folks kind of ride a circuit where they could be in different parts of the school district each week. So that's something that might work. Again, I don't have any cost figures on that yet. I don't know what that would be. As far as tapping into some of the free testing that takes place, I'm not sure we would qualify for that, but we certainly would look into it. It might be something that falls into just like going to a private physician, whatever your insurance coverage is would take care of that. We also looked at, and I think I shared with you all that we looked at what it would be for our staff to actually provide testing, and that would be huge. When you look at training, physician protocols, the supplies that we need, getting the supplies to a lab, having an agreement with the lab, all of those things would be.
You mean if our school nurses?
If our school nurses did it.
Right.
And that would be on top of their already responsibilities with sick kids and medications and contact tracing, which they do a huge amount of in the school. So really working with an outside entity would probably be the option that we would have. Again, like you said, it would be voluntary. We would have to wait to see how many or who would take advantage of that if it were more readily available.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, just because I saw it tonight and in your update, was approximately, there was on that report, if I can borrow yours for a second, we had, student information that was volunteered by families or students. That 64 students sent home with symptoms and 25 were tested. Right. And I can't help but think that that's because some folks don't have access, and it'd be interesting if we could not require people, but help provide access for folks. Maybe they don't want to, I don't know, or maybe their doctor didn't recommend it, I don't know. But I saw that on the report tonight, it was interesting. But I'm interested in if we could continue to look into if we could partner with somebody else to provide that kind of testing.
Do you think it would be a good idea to maybe do a survey of the employees to see if they would be interested in voluntary testing, or is that just not necessary?
I think we could do that.
Go ahead, Mr. Crane.
So over the summer, some of the legislators, in response to some of the community requests, worked with us to provide some testing. I believe it was essentially through MUSC, coming down and doing some site tests. I know Wagner was a recipient of that, as were several other places around. But I'll just toss that idea out there that I know Bill Taylor could be approached about that. Melissa Remus could be approached about that, as well as some of our town council members, because they have already gotten some inroads possibly. And of course, that's MUSC, whether they're willing to do it, and they were sort of doing it as a community benefit, and they had the research aspect of it tied in. So I don't know if that would be feasible or not, but just as a you know, as a possible solution. And I know we've worked with them already, and not with MUSC, but maybe we've got a little bit of goodwill since we allow them to come use our parking lots and air conditioning. So just a thought.
Mr. Nessel, you want to make a motion so then we can kind of...
Yeah, this is going to be weird, but I'm not exactly sure how to phrase it, but I did like, Mr. Chairman, your idea that Mr. Lawrence agreed with. If my motion would be that the district do a survey to gauge the level of interest from our employees on getting access to voluntary testing. I think at the same time, you have to take a parallel path to understand how we could potentially provide that with agencies like DHEC.
I'll second that. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that the district do a survey to see the interest in voluntary COVID testing, and then in parallel, assess the ability to deliver those tests if they wanted them.
That would include
cost. We'll come up with a proposal at the next meeting, which would include all of those details.
Any other discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Crane.
Just as a point of clarification, Mr. Nessel, are we specifically looking at staff, or are we wanting to include students in that, students and families?
If we can do 2 tiers, I think that'd be nice to have with the information that the district comes back with.
Any other questions? All right, so just to restate it, so it's been moved and seconded that we do a survey of the employees to see the interest in COVID testing, and in parallel, look at the delivery models for voluntary testing. Kind of summarize it there. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Kim? All right, the next one, Mr. Nessel, discussion of mask requirements and code of conduct implementations.
Yeah, so right now, we currently have a decision where we're going by November 5 days a week in schools. Then therefore, with the lessening of distancing or not being able to do the social distancing we are today, all the other controls are going to be that much more paramount. Previously, if you go back all the way to July, we've had discussions about wearing face coverings or masks and the enforcement of such. I personally don't think there was any very clear, decisive guidance provided to schools on how to handle that. And I'll get maybe to a motion in a second, but what I'm proposing is I do think there has been feedback. You know, I don't hear from every teacher or parent in Aiken County, but there has been feedback that there are already issues with face masks in compliance with that. And I think we should consider, you know, as we're moving back, or we are back and continue to move back towards fuller classrooms, that we make that some clear guidance to the schools on how to handle that from a discipline standpoint. So my motion would be that we give direction to schools that, at least on the first offense, that we treat it like a level 1 infraction, like defiance. And I'd be interested in also what the recommendation from the district would be, or thoughts from the district would be.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, and then we can have some discussion on it. So, the motion was to give direction to the schools to make the first offense a level 1 infraction. Good, Mr. Young.
So, my belief from the very beginning has been that we could address mask issues, not as discipline issues, but, you know, with a phone call to parents. I asked, at the very beginning, I asked teachers not to get into confrontations with students, but to refer it to their administrator and have the administrator contact the parent. But, and I haven't really heard any issues with that. I haven't heard a lot of, well, actually, nobody has told me that there were any situations where they haven't been able to get a parent to deal with it. But, I think the way that the code of conduct is set up now, I think that a level 1 infraction, I mean, if I ask you to put your mask on and you refuse to do it, well, that's a failure to obey a directive. So automatically, I think that is a level 1 offense. If it became chronic, they continue to refuse to wear the mask, then I think it goes to a level 2 offense, which would be an insubordination. So I think that's within that. So I think if I'm understanding your motion, it's just making that clear understanding to all of our schools and all of our personnel that that's the expectation. That we don't want to make mask wearing in and of itself a discipline issue, but it is a health issue, it is a safety issue. If I ask you to put your mask on and you don't do it, you're being insubordinate.
Yeah, so I'll even, do I need to amend my motion, Keith?
Well, let's see if there's any discussion on that, and then I'll let you.
Okay.
And then we'll go, Mr. Simons.
I think it would be nice if people would comply and we wouldn't have to get in a confrontation. But at the same time, I don't think we can patty cake around the reality that there will be students that want to challenge that. And I think our teachers, administrators need some clear direction. I think I may agree with Mr. Lawrence that it might not require a specific policy on this topic, but definitely, as you stated, and just now, some clear direction, because I've gotten some questions that, and I think there's some ambiguity over how do I handle a situation. And, I'm not a big make a rule for everything, because it kind of backs you into a corner sometimes, but I do think they need some, students and, everybody needs some understanding on how we're gonna handle it, so.
Anyone else, and then, good.
Yeah, so, and just to say a little bit, my personal opinion is that we did not give very clear and strong guidance to schools when it came to this. And I understand what Mr. Lawrence is saying as far as the violations are already there. So I'd like to amend, I think I gave specific instructions on what it should be, and I'd like to amend my motion that we just send clear guidance to schools to follow the code of conduct when it comes to defiance and insubordination as it relates to face masks in compliance to those policies. The violation's already there.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we give clear guidance to schools for defiance and insubordination with respect to the wearing of face coverings in our schools. Go ahead, Mr. Crane, I think you had a comment.
I did, just from a point of clarification, there are instances where if children are socially distancing, like on recess or something like that, if you're outside, I think that the amended motion kind of handles this. I wouldn't necessarily want to make a rule, to Mr. Siles' point, where if a child was outside or social distancing and someone just wanted to have a mask on and they're a mile away from everybody, I wouldn't want to be too heavy-handed, but I think there needs to be some enforcement there. So more of a comment, not really a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Moore.
Just one quick clarification. I think I like the amendment the way it was stated. The only thing I'm wondering, if we're gonna make that clarification to the schools, are we gonna make the parents part of that clarification? I'd hate for them to find out after the fact that this is an issue.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, we certainly would do that. And I do want to say, and I'm sure there are instances around, but in talking to my colleagues around the state, this truly is one of the success stories of the pandemic, that very few issues in schools around South Carolina that have run into problems with students wearing masks. But certainly there are instances of it, and as we increase the population in our schools, then safety becomes that much more paramount.
All right, any other discussion? Okay, so we're gonna vote on the amended motion. So the other one is not on the table anymore. So the motion is amended is for the district to give clear guidance to schools on defiance and insubordination with respect to wearing of face coverings. Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? That's unanimous. All right, good. That was all we had under individual board members. I do have one thing on item 3 there. We were gonna have a salary committee meeting on the 23rd at 8 o'clock. I think it's just Mr. Moulton and I.
Communications committee is meeting this Thursday at 5.
Okay, good. Communications this Thursday at 5. All right, anything else under individual board members? All right, moving on to Mr. Lawrence, superintendent's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You mentioned at your moment of silence, one of our students, Edward McKenzie Jr., 5th grader at North Aiken Elementary School, lost his life in a violent act Saturday night, early Sunday morning. And I just want to express that my heart and the heart of Aiken County Public Schools, collective hearts of Aiken County Public Schools, goes out to Edward's family and to the whole North Aiken community. So just want to let them know that we are here for that community and our prayers are with you. Also, I want to mention that when we opened school this year, parents who chose Aiken Innovate, our virtual model, committed to that model for the first semester. Those who wish to continue throughout the whole school year in Aiken Innovate will certainly have the opportunity to do that. But those who wish to enroll in face-to-face instruction for the second semester are going to have an opportunity beginning on October 23rd to do that. And we will begin our media blitz on that, letting them know that that window will open on October 23rd and it'll run for 3 weeks until November 13th, giving parents the opportunity to choose, if they wish, to leave virtual and go to face-to-face. The first day of the second semester will be Monday, January 25th. Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
So you're gonna give the people who are currently in hybrid, who are frightened about going to full-time school, the opportunity to enroll in person?
That has not been, that's not something that I have in mind. And the reason for that is that there were 2 choices given. The choice for virtual or the choice for what we didn't call it hybrid. We called it a transition to traditional learning, which started with hybrid. So everybody, if they didn't know, should have known that when we were starting at 2 days instruction and then 3 days of remote learning, that eventually that was going to become 5 days of face-to-face instruction. So in my belief, the decision as to whether the pandemic concerned you to the extent that you didn't want your child in a school but wanted to choose virtual instead, that was the time to make that decision, because the understanding had to be that eventually we would be going to school 5 days a week.
I fully agree that it was communicated quite clearly. However, my email and comments that we hear from people indicate something otherwise, because, we've got people telling us that now that we're being horrible to send their kids back to, not their kids, but to send people back to school full time, and they're going to all die, whatever. You know, and apparently, they didn't realize, the teachers didn't realize that they had the opportunity to sign up virtual. We had to draft over 100 teachers to teach in virtual because not enough people volunteered for it. But now we're being very bad guys to teachers and forcing them to go back to the classroom, which I thought was pretty clearly communicated in the plan that was adopted by the board in July, that the intention was to go back to regular school as quickly as we could. I do, however, have a real problem forcing a child to go back to school full-time if indeed the parent has serious concerns about the health of that child. And I would certainly recommend that we look at allowing kids to enroll, parents to enroll their children in virtual if they have serious concerns about returning full-time. I don't know what that would do to your teacher allocations and so forth. I realize it's a mess. It would be a mess for you to try to straighten it out. But I think that the health and well-being of the kids, and even if it's the mental health of the parent, the child is probably more important. And one of 9, I would strongly suggest that we do allow, to whatever extent possible, I don't know what we're getting into, but to whatever extent possible, we certainly have to listen to parents who want to enroll their children in virtual out of the hybrid model, and see if we can accommodate those requests so that they won't be forced anybody into. But once they're in, I would have this proviso, once you do that, you're in for the rest of the year. No, none of this bounces back.
And so we had that proviso at the beginning to commit to a semester, and it's been I see 5 that get to me every single day, and I know that our principals see 15 times that many, and our EDs see more, and it is a barrage of changing my mind. And we've had some change their mind in both directions within the same month. So I'm asking that parents, when they make a commitment, to maintain that commitment.
Well, I fully agree with you, and I know that the problems that it creates having those school administrators, you know, once you allocate teachers, it's really hard to be shuffling them back and forth, you know, in the middle of the dance, so to speak. This is an unusual time, and we're asking people to deal with things that they've never dealt with before, and we're being asked to deal with. We don't have a template blueprint to know exactly what's going to happen, which is why I erroneously talked about experimenting. I did not mean it the way it was interpreted in the press. But I do think we need to cut people a little slack, I guess, and forgive their inability to stick with what they agreed to do, you know, in the beginning. You have behaved absolutely superbly as far as I'm concerned. I know you've made exceptions to people who, you know, changed their minds in the midstream and all that. You know, you've done a really remarkable job of, I think, listening to people and honoring their requests as much as you can. I'm personally acquainted with some of those situations, and I know that to be a fact. But at the same time, I do have some compassion for the wishy-washiness of the parent, because the kids think they know what they're getting into. They get there, they don't. They get all upset. They get emotional. They start having anxieties and so forth. I think I'm just recommending trying to be a little loose in administering that. Now, of course, that creates some problems too, because if you do it for one, the expectation is you're going to be able to do it for all. And I'm not sure we can guarantee that, but.
We'll certainly look at what options are available to us, and we have set some criteria. I mean, we've had situations often with students with IEPs. If the IEP team made a certain recommendation, and we looked at that very seriously, or if medical conditions in the home have changed, like you may have made the decision for face-to-face learning based on the medical conditions at home back in July. Well, some new diagnosis or something in October has changed that. So we certainly look at all of those things and are accommodating as much as we can be.
All right, so we do need a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of considering the following matters in such order as the board deems appropriate. Well, we only have one matter, so that makes it easy. Legal matters, continued discussion of contract for in-house counsel. Following the executive session meeting, the board will reconvene into regular session to announce the matters considered and to take any actions as may be necessary. Do I hear a motion?
Move it going into executive session.
So it's been moved and seconded. Everyone in favor, raise your hand. All right, if we can meet back there in about 5 minutes, that would be good. Thank you.
Braves are
Yeah,
winning
I
in
think
case
that's a
anybody
good
wants to
point.
know.
Be okay with that? Yeah, I'm good with all that.
What inning are they in?
A
We actually
little
started
bit ago,
watching
it was
baseball
a
2 weeks
fifth,
ago.
6-0 in the bottom of the fifth.
Eight thirty-four.
What's your mind? Yeah.
Ah, how about that? Thank you. I appreciate that. No, 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 definitely not. We're just waiting on Patrice. Yes, ma'am. All right, while in executive session, we did have some discussion on in-house legal counsel. I don't think we have any action that we have to take from that. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. All right, good. Y'all have a good evening.
I'll